Hi, it's Victor Perton on behalf of the Australian Leadership Project, and today I am delighted to have Babette Bensoussan join us. Babette has a wealth of experience in leadership. She coaches, she mentors, she's vibrant herself, a personal leader. So Babette, welcome and thank you for joining the Australian Leadership Project.
Thank you, Victor. Indeed, I feel very privileged to be here. Thank you.
Babette, thinking about leadership, what's your favourite story of leadership?
That's an interesting question, Victor. And I have to say that when I think of leadership, I think of the first step, which is self-leadership. If you don't have this first step of self-leadership, you cannot lead others. So a good leader for me is someone who has already done this personal transformation and has become, has self-reflected and understand themselves. So for me, one of the greatest stories is I look at Nelson Mandela. So Nelson Mandela is someone who, despite his experiences, despite what happened to him, he self-transformed. He focused on his self-leadership before he led the African nation and before he did all the work he did. He's outstanding. And so to me, when I think of the best stories or the best boss or the best leaders, I look immediately for how they did self-leadership. How did they transform themselves first? You know, you can't lead others if you can't lead yourself and motivate yourself. That's the core of leadership, is about you. And, you know, I always think of the other quote from Mahatma Gandhi when he was being interviewed by a journalist, and he was talking away to the journalist, and he said to the journalist, "Excuse me, I have to go now. I have to catch up to my followers." You know, it's about leading yourself first, not about leading others. So
Yeah, you
me,
put it. Go on, Babette. Yeah.
go on.
No, you put it so well. I had the opportunity to visit Robben Island and to talk to prisoners who'd been there with Mandela, and also to make some contribution to the early post-apartheid government. And as you say, he changed himself in order to change the nation and then lead the nation and to become a global leader. So I think, Babette, you've nailed this notion that it's personal transformation that makes the difference.
Rather than leading others. So for me, that's when I talk about stories of great leaders, it's all about leaders who have been through some form of personal transformation, personal leadership. They've led their lives.
So thinking about Australia today, Babette, what are the unique qualities of leading in Australia, of being an Australian leader?
I think one of the unique gifts of Australian leaders is giving things a fair go. And for me, in all honesty, the leaders in Australia are not our politicians and are not the executives of large corporations. For me, the leaders in Australia are the people who are the entrepreneurs who try something new despite all the odds. The small to medium-sized business owners, or people who try things, who work as teams. You know, the farmers, you know, who are anyone who's giving it a fair go. You know, they get up in the morning, they say, "I'm going to give this a go," and they try it. And to me, that is leadership. It is not being a politician. It is not running large corporations. I don't see a great deal of personal transformation or self-leadership, as I call it, among a lot of the so-called leaders of Australian society. I do see it far more in the average person in the street that give it a fair go, that are willing to stumble, are willing to make a mistake, and then they get up and keep going. And you know, so they're showing that to other people around them, that this is what leadership is about. So
Yeah,
that to me
spot
is,
on. Spot on,
yeah.
Babette. I often use the line with the audiences that I speak to is, I ask them to repeat the mantra, the leader is the person in my mirror. And we see that
Yes.
leadership right across society.
Look, I agree with you. And I think, giving it a fair go, and yes, you can make some mistakes, but yes, it's like Thomas Edison's expression that he knows 999 ways that things can go, how things can go wrong, but it's those steps that helped him make the light bulb, get to that 1000 correct invention. And when I look at the young people who are struggling with innovation, I mean, you've got to remember, give it a fair go. Australia per capita is one of the most innovative countries in the world with what we do, and innovation is all about making mistakes and trying again and going one way and trying another. I mean, that's why I think, giving it a fair go is so Australian,
And
uniquely Australian.
And you're living up there on the Sunshine Coast now. Do you see any regional difference? Is there a sunnier disposition on the Sunshine Coast?
Without a doubt, I'm finding that people on the Sunshine Coast are far more positive. I don't know if it's the sun or it's the beaches or what, but there's a gentleness, a kindness, a caring that you just don't find in the cities, in the large corporations, in the large banks. It doesn't exist. I mean, I've been very fortunate. I've worked for Apple Computers and Levi Strauss and other, organizations in my earlier career. And then I had my own consulting firm in strategy and competition. And I saw a lot of the large, my clients were global Fortune 500 companies and the top 1,000. And I saw the culture in those companies. And it wasn't about giving it a fair go or being positive or kind. So, and I find it here definitely far more, it's gentler, and the people are far more positive about things. Don't know why.
Yeah. So what do Australians want of their leaders today?
I think more than anything, I think they want them to be optimistic, because that's the natural Australian characteristic. I think optimistic, respectful, give things a fair go. I think they're the kind of things that, they want from their leaders. Yeah, I think, but they also want a vision, a direction. I think that not just Australia, but I think any human people want vision, direction, something to aim for, something to grow for, whether it's a personal issue you want to lead yourself on, or some others, a group issue you want to lead on, want to follow on. But I think people want a vision, a direction, someone that shows respect, and gives things a fair go, that you don't have to be perfect first time out.
And thinking about your own life, who've been the leaders who've inspired you and inspire you?
There is not one leader that has done it all for me. So I've taken bits of different people's lives with regards to leadership. So, I like the way Oprah Winfrey has managed to create what she did in her life. I greatly admire her for that, what she created. Then there's also, I look at another person I admire is Frances Hesselbein. Now, most people haven't heard of Frances Hesselbein, but Frances Hesselbein was named by Peter Drucker as the best CEO he's ever come across. So, and why? She led the Girl Scout movement. So it was a dying organization when she took it over, and she really revamped it. And Peter Drucker put his money where his mouth is, to the extent that he made her the president of the Peter Drucker Foundation. So, but he named her as the best CEO. And when you look at how she did it, how she included the ground up to create the Girl Scout movement and to revitalize it. You know, that was lovely that, you know, that inclusion that she did. Another leader that I admire is a woman called Joyce Noyce. Now, Joyce was an Australian woman. She has received more medals, more recognition by foreign governments than any Australian ever. And people think of Nancy Wake, you know, the White Mouse and other. But Joyce she was an Australian from Queensland and helped during World War One and World War Two with refugees, with the soldiers. She was an extraordinary Australian woman, and yet we don't recognise her. She reminds me of the quiet achievers, the great Australian, the quiet achievers. She's one of those, you know. So there are a whole lot of people that I take bits. So from Oprah, it's the spiritual side. From Frances, it's asking others around you what they think, what would they like. And Joyce, it's about, you know, rolling up your sleeves and doing things, but you don't have to shout it to the world as long as you know it in your heart. So here are 3 different women with wonderful traits that I take bits from as their leadership styles.
I love your comment on the spirituality of Oprah Winfrey. I saw Deepak Chopra on late night television the other night, and he said he'd proposed to Oprah, that he'd said, marry me. And she said, well, I couldn't be Oprah Chopra.
God, she's funny. She's so funny. But yeah, so you can see that for me, the best stories are always from different, you take bits from different people. There is no one perfect person to take, you know, as a leader. You know, I look at another example of a gentleman that I learned a lot about humility from him, and that was Ben Zander. Now, Ben Zander was the chief conductor of the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra. And I was very privileged to go to a conference and where he was the keynote speaker. And it was for a small group of us at this conference. And he got us all singing Handel's Messiah. He put us all in different groups so our voices would be okay. And the humility of the man, you know, of what he'd achieved. And that to me is leadership. It's not arrogance. It's not throwing your weight around. It's the humility, the asking people around you, noticing people around you. That's leadership. So I've been very fortunate that I've had so many different people walk into my life and touch it and change me and then walk out because of their leadership styles.
So
you're one of them.
Oh, thank you for that. Thinking about your comment that people want optimism and optimistic leadership. What is it that makes you optimistic? What's your case for optimism?
I could answer that in one word: gratitude. In Australia, we are so blessed. Now, yes, there are struggles. We all struggle. There are always around us people with great courage. We've got friends that are ill, you know, elderly relatives that are not coping. But I'm optimistic because there is so much to be grateful for. I love what I do. I love working with people and helping them to see how great they are. I believe we all have greatness in us, and you know, sometimes we don't see it. We get in the way of ourselves. And as a coach, I'm privileged to take away some of the blindfolds that people have around themselves and their abilities. And you know, How lucky are we? The sun shines, the air's fresh, you know, yeah. What's there not to be optimistic about?
Babette, I am grateful for your wonderful optimism, your effervescence, and this wonderful, wonderful discussion on Australian leadership. So,
Yeah,
thank you.
you're most welcome. It's a topic I'm very passionate about because, and I'm passionate about it because people keep talking about leadership of others, and that's not the issue. It's about self-leadership, and that's the key.
Absolutely brilliant. So, on behalf of the Australian Leadership Project, can I thank you, Babette? I think people will be inspired having listened to you and having caught some of that optimism and gratitude that you've demonstrated today.
Thank you, Victor, very much for this opportunity. Very much appreciated.
And if you'd like to read more about the Australian Leadership Project, or watch some more of our interviews, or even contribute your own wisdom, please visit our website at www.australianleadership.com. Have a superb day.